thank gosh. My friends are watching me. Hi, Lauren. Watching me try to figure this out. Like, I need to turn the AC on because I'm also sweating.
How are you?
How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. Wow, it's Monday. I feel like today was very long. Like, it was just very long. And I have allergies. And my allergies really been acting up. So I've just been, like, sniffling constantly.
Yeah.
Very congested.
Oh, no.
How are you?
I'm okay. So TikTok Live works very differently from IG Live, in that, you know, I do not get to see your viewers list. I do not get to see your chat. So our chat is completely different. So right now, So you do not get to see who's tuning in from me, and who's tuning in from my live, and who's tuning in from your live. Yeah. So it works it's a different system.
But is my crowd able to like click on you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if they want to, follow you, there's a button there. But in terms of keeping viewers in track, like it's all different. We have to do that separately. Yeah.
That's actually wild because I know that you have like not the nicest following all the time, and my following is all very like so supportive. So I'm here. I was gonna be like, okay, I'm ready to like go to combat for you because I'm here to stick up for my girl. So, anyways, happy Pride. I hope you had like a great weekend. I also know that we wanted to talk about anti-Asianness, which is something I feel like we have so much to say about. So what's on your mind?
Yeah. What do you think anti-Asian? How do you think you have experienced anti-Asianness in your, I know, for those of you who don't know Nadya is one of my friends. She's been in social media activism space for far longer than I have. She's so young too. So I think she's really brave. If you want to share a little bit about, who you are and what you're doing here and what your passion is, we're all ears.
I'm Nadya. I kind of feel like we're the same age. Like, am I totally wrong? I like assume that you're a couple years older than me.
Yes, probably a couple years older than you. Yes.
No, that's what I'm saying. You're like only a couple years older than me. But I'm very passionate about periods and gender equality, and got into all of that when I was 16. On the nonprofit side, I started a nonprofit called Period. Led that for about 6 years, and then was on book tour with my book Period. I ran for office, actually, to kind of answer your question. I ran for office when I was a freshman at Harvard. And I announced my campaign a couple months after Donald Trump was elected in 2016. And pretty immediately, the headlines, but also the pushback on a national level was very much about my race, right? People saying I was the start of an Asian invasion, a one-person Asian invasion. And I was moved around on campus a couple of times, actually, because of death threats I was receiving because of my race. And so I think what's really fascinating is, like, to me, anti-Asianness has shown up in my life, growing up. I grew up in New York City, actually, where I feel like the anti-Asianness was like much more in your face, right? Where it was like people calling like, oh, you chink when you're like in first grade. But anti-Asianness showed up more when I was in Portland, growing up there in like, the whitest major city in the US, where it was a lot more about like, oh, we don't see color and you aren't a person of color because you are just like us, right? And I think it was kind of that erasure of it, and which also is, like model minority myth wise denies like your experience as a person of color. And I think that for me, it has been like honestly a very recent journey that I've started to really lean into, like even in myself, dismantling a lot of like the shame that I've carried from the anti-Asianness, and also dismantling like anti-Asianness within myself. But I think that it's everything from like violent death threats for it all the way to I actually feel the most attack coming from Asian men. like in my experience doing, you know, various work on the social media side and doing, you know, writing and stuff, the people who come for me the most when I write about Asian American identity are usually Asian men.
That's so unfortunate. I've said this multiple times, but I think anti-Asianness resides in every community. Um, White community, Asian community, Latina community, Latinx community, Black community, no community, right? Indigenous community, no community is exempt from anti-Asianness. Just like, you know, anti-Blackness resides in every community. And I think what has been really frustrating for me is, I think we are all in this space fighting our own fight. You know, we want equity, we want fairness, we want liberation, and we want Asian people, you know, genuinely to do better and unite better and, you know, be treated better. And I think often what we don't, you know, because we're so busy checking other people, and checking others people anti-Asianness when it's directed to us, that we don't really take the time to, you know, sit down with our own anti-Asianness and really think about how it's showing up in our lives. And I think that's particularly true with Asian men.
Yeah.
It's, you know, a lot of Asian men are just, you know, very, you know, patriarchal. You know, they have their own stuff they have their own misogyny and they have their own homophobia. And so, you know, our community is rife with a lot of problems. And I just think that, you know, when people say stop Asian hate, my mind immediately goes to, well, Asian people sort of have to do better. Like, we have to treat each other better and we have to show up for ourselves. Like, otherwise, you know, they're not going to have a reference point as to how to treat us. Because if we're continuing to eat each other, like, how are they going to look at us and say, that's how you treat them, right? Like, I think we need to treat each other better, like within our own community. And I think for you particularly, when you ran for office, you were so young and like you were so talented and you're so smart. And I think you defied a lot of, you know, stereotype of, you know, what an East Asian girl should be like. And I think a lot of people didn't like that. And I'm not really surprised that, you know, like, I think it's really unfortunate, but I'm not really surprised that it was Asian men who came after you. Right.
Well, no, I mean, I so appreciate that. And I think another thing is, you know, on the topic of dismantling it within myself, you know, I think that for me, I resented other Asian girls, right? Like, for me, I grew up with my mom telling me, you know, warning me, society, because of what you look like, will think that you are quiet, will think that you are submissive. And I grew up, me and my sisters all feeling like hating the stereotypes against us, right? And if you look at my sisters and I, like, I was raised to be louder. Like, I lose my voice at the end of every week because I literally have grown up thinking that in order to defy stereotypes, I have to be loud, right? And in order to, you know, people make fun of Asian people growing up, you know, fresh off the boat. And like, for me as like first or second generation Japanese and Chinese, like, I did not want to be that, right? And I think that there was a part of me growing up where I really resented and judged other Asian girls who were my peers, who I felt were like perpetuating some sort of stereotype, right? Which is anti-Asianness within myself, because for me, I think I very much felt like the stereotype you are perpetuating is what I'm having to overcome, which is unfair to them, but also like comes from a place of like self-hatred, right? And I think that, you know, the model minority myth, I think, really explains this as well, which is, if society is telling us that because I am Asian American, I must like be like working very hard, come from a culture that's like getting ready for me to go to Harvard. Like, when my sisters are like, when I had bad grades, I would feel like a bad Asian, right? So the idea, you know, it's a joke being a bad Asian. What does it mean to be a bad Asian? Like, in terms of your grades, in terms of your academic achievement, in terms of what your goals are. And I think that even those jokes, I look back on those and catch myself making them now, which is like, what anti-Asianness am I perpetuating? What stereotypes am I holding? How am I kind of reinforcing the model minority myth when I lean into that too?
Well, And anti-Asianness is not, it doesn't look, I mean, it's very complex and it's very layered. I mean, anti-Asianness doesn't just look like you know, somebody forcing onto us a stereotype and demanding us to do better, right? Like get a better grade. You know,
Yeah.
that is part of anti-Asianness, but I think the anti-Asianness that I've experienced, you know, from other minority groups have been, you know, them assuming things about me in terms of my privilege, right? Like in terms that, you know, like I, you know, oh, you know, she's an East Asian woman who has gone to Harvard and who has multiple degrees from Ivy League. She must be one of those. She must be one of those East Asian women. And that's really harmful, right? Like because it erases the complexities and the humanities of East Asian people, and you know, who have diverse backgrounds, and who have stories to tell. And so I think anti-Asianness, what it comes down to is dehumanization, and in thinking that Asian people are a monolith, and that we do not have humanity, and we do not have each of us does not have unique stories to bring to the table. And I think that's, you know, that informs and shapes how people treat us. You know, it's either, you know, and there's no gray in between, right? Like that's my problem. It's either you are a submissive, docile person, Asian person who, you know, who's good at everything, right? Who gets good grades, or you are an East Asian woman who's really fucking privileged, and you know, who just does everything, and who works hard, and who just is like, so it's, there is no, I mean, these are really extreme stereotypes, I feel like, and I personally have not, you know, do not know a lot of people who fall into either of these categories. And all my East Asian friends, all my Southeast Asian friends, you know, are very different people, like who don't fall into any categories or stereotypes that, you know, Western people have constructed for us, on our behalf. So I think it has been really frustrating being in this space and being accused of, you know, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes being accused of, oh, like she doesn't know what she's talking about because she's privileged, right? Oh, like why does she talk about, you know, why does she have to list her credentials, you know, having gone to Ivy League institutions? You know, why, you know, that's an East Asian privilege. And I'm like, I'm not sure, right? Like, so, you know, so anti-Asianness can take in many different forms. And I've seen that from, you know, many different communities. I like, no community is exempt from this.
I think what you said is really interesting, and I mean, I'm also curious about how you internalize it too. I think that, you know, it's fascinating, and I think about this a lot from the perspective of going to Harvard, right? Which is like, I'm not going to say like going to Harvard is an immense privilege, right? It is an immense privilege. The problem is when you equate that to being Asian, right? Which is like, being Asian got you a spot. And I saw you made a post recently about affirmative action. I think that's so important, right? Because I mean, we saw in the last, you know, year the affirmative action case regarding Asian Americans as well. But I feel like it's like, okay, we're here to have like a productive conversation about identity and race, and let's talk about the issues at hand rather than like what disqualifies you from the first place, which is actually anti-Asianness to another degree, which is you have to prove being a person of color and like someone who can talk about it in the first place. And I think that that's something that I really run into actually in the last year, where like I want to share my experiences or like what I'm learning, and before I can really even do that, not only am I proving that I am ready to have the conversation, but I'm being asked to prove that I'm a person of color, right? And that to me is really interesting, because I've gotten into many conversations where someone's like, but how can you experience racial discrimination? And like genuinely, like I have to be like, well, I'm just not white. And this comes from like both other like people, actually other people of color mainly, right? Which is like, but it's not like really racism, right? Like that's different. But I'm curious about like how you internalize it. Like when it hits you, I feel like it's so easy to be like, oh, it, like brush it off, or is it more like it, like what does that do to you inside?
Yeah, I mean, I think the times that I did feel very betrayed, were the times when I experienced anti-Asianness coming from minority individuals, racial minority individuals, you know, thinking that, you know, they would understand what racism is, and they would understand how white supremacy impacts, you know, every non-white person. and thinking that, I will be able to find community with them. And, when they tell me that I can't experience real racism, right? Or that, that I am privileged because I'm East Asian, like all that, all of that narratives, like those are really harmful. And I think those narratives also were constructed by white supremacy to keep us divided and keep us not being able to relate to one another and resonate with each other. Because I think if they were to hear our stories and get to know us, I'm confident that they would be able to see what they have experienced in what we have experienced. And it's just that there is no communication pipeline because I mean, Stop Asian community is not strong. Like we haven't had a community. Like the Stop Asian Hate is a very new thing, and so a lot of Asian people are waking up to the fact that we can in fact have a community amongst us. So it's to keep our community strong, like I think we really need to rely on other people of color communities. And I think those are the moments that really hurt. When brown men tell me that I can't experience racism, right? When black women, when black queer men, right? When they tell me that I am not, that because I'm East Asian, like I have, I was able to acquire everything I've acquired simply because I'm East Asian women. Like those things do not compute. Those things are not real. And when I hear stuff like that, it really, it's demoralizing, and also it betrays what the very human story that I have as a human being who happens to be an East Asian person, East Asian woman, a woman of color. And so I think I'm seeing that my connections are like in and out. Is that true?
No, I can hear you perfectly.
Cool. So I'm gonna turn my comment off because right on my end, the comments are getting a little. I can tell that my comments are getting a little ridiculous.
I'm curious how you respond to that, because that's something that to be honest, I think I'm still dismantling like a lot of my own shame. Like I don't naturally feel like I do have a place in some of these conversations, mostly because I've been told so many times that it's not my place, right?
It's not your place. Where is not your place?
To like talk about my experiences with racial discrimination because it's like not real racism or something like that, And so to be honest, like I think a lot of the times I share my experiences and then I'm like much more of a listener, which is really interesting because as you know, like I am very vocal about like gender equality, but when it comes to actually talking about race, I think there's a part of me where I also grew up being teased for not being like really Asian because I am like, I don't speak another language. Like I don't identify with like Asian, like Japanese or Chinese culture. And so when I get those comments, and I do get those comments actually even more in person, which hurts the most, how I always feel really lost on how to respond, right? Because I'm like, I want to be able to say like, yes, like are we going more into oppression Olympics? Like I understand that I don't have that same maybe to this certain degree, or it hasn't been as physically violent. Like how do you approach those conversations of both defending your lived experience while also being able to like acknowledge like what they have gone through as well, but also call it like it isn't about oppression Olympics in that way?
Yeah, to dismantle white supremacy, we have to have POC unity. And POC unity comes from, understanding each other's pain. That we at the end of the day, like our oppression may look different, but we're all oppressed. We're all experiencing oppression to a different degree and in different nature. And when we don't understand it, when we don't try to find community with each other, we are sort of fucked. Like, because we're giving white supremacy our power. This one power that we have, that to unite and rise up and smash this. So I think whenever that I've experienced it, I think I've always tried to engage in a dialogue and like really try to have a discussion that is human. Like just I'm a human person with a story, just like they are. And to be able to to try to find a common ground and try to see each other's humanity, I think that's always been the way to go. But also, like, I think the principle stays the same, right? Like, just because you are empathizing with somebody and just because you want to stand with another person who you relate to, that doesn't mean that you have to erase yourself. That doesn't mean that you have to invalidate your own pain. Like, your pain is your pain and your experience is your experience. Like, that does not have to be at the expense of, that does not have to be sacrificed. So we can advocate for another person who's also experiencing something very similar. You know what I mean? And I think that's what, I think that's what's often, tripping us up, that, we have to give it up. We have to let it go. Like, and it's like, no, why would I? And also, like, mind you, like, all my mentors are, well, not all, most of my mentors and advisors have been, people of color. And they strikingly have been, I've been really inspired by all of them because of the way they encouraged me to own my experiences around anti-Asianness. This was way before Stop Asian Hate became a thing. And they, when we started talking about racial justice, and we were talking about Black Lives Matter, and we were organizing for Black Lives Matter, they all encouraged me to really tap into my own experiences with anti-Asianness. And they really encouraged me to see the link between Asian hate and, anti-Blackness. And so I'm more, those are the people who really inspired and, shaped me. So I'm never gonna, I subscribe to them, right? Like, nobody has ever told me, nobody who I ever look up to ever told me to shut the fuck up about my own experiences around anti-Asianness and the fact that exists in every community. All right. This is about, this is about liberation of every human being. This is about, empowerment of every human being. And so if my voice has to, be at the expense of another person's, that's not how it really works.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think everything you're saying is
really
so powerful.
Big fly here. Like, the fly has been, like, just, like, all over. Like, it's just like, the fly is like, oh, I love that. Anti-Asianness.
Also, I forgot that my stove was on, and I was, like, smelling, and I was like, oh God, I'm learning how to cook, or I'm trying to push myself to learn how to cook. It's not going so well, but we're going for it. No, I mean, everything that you're saying is like so powerful, and I feel like that honestly is something I'm still figuring out now, right? Which is like, how do I come into the conversation knowing that, like, one, I have so much learning to do, but we all have so much learning to do, right? But also being unapologetic of, like, what is going on is fucked up, right? And I think that that's something where, I mean, it is very black or white thinking. People are either like, you know what you're talking about, or you absolutely do not know what you're talking about. Like, shut up, right? And I think that that's the scary thing. And I mean, even when we've talked about cancel culture before, right? Like, we find ourselves in so much of, like, not room to grow, because it's either like you stand up and you're like, I have experienced the most, and not giving space for other people to experience theirs, or, like, it's just very black or white, right? And I think that for me, like, I still have a lot of, like, my own, even, gaining confidence myself to be able to take up space, and which is so counterintuitive to me in conversations about race, because I do think that I have, like, for so many years felt, like, belittled for talking about it, that I'm having to, like, get through that myself,
Yeah, and I feel like the only times that I'm agitated when somebody says, like, that's anti-Asianness is because, like, is when, I mean, I think every community has this problem. I think brown community has this problem. I think black community has this problem. I mean, white people have this problem, like, all the time. But it's like you know, like whenever somebody disagrees with me, right? Or whenever somebody disagrees with an Asian person and that person voices their opinion against an Asian person, you can't just go and say like, oh, that's anti-Asianness, like because you're not hearing me, like because you're silencing me, right? Like that's not really anti-Asianness, right? Like it's no, like it's, you know, because I see that often, like not only in my own community, but you know, all these other communities, like when somebody disagrees with you, like, listen, if your quote unquote philosophical disagreements actually hurt human beings, right? And it actually is like racist and like homophobic and it's actually harmful ideologies, yes, that is anti-Asianness. Yes, that is anti, you know, like whatever. But it's, you know, just because someone disagrees with me and has different opinions and different like analysis on certain things, you know, from me, I'm not gonna go and say like you're anti-Asian because you're now disagreeing with me. That's not how it actually works, right? Like it's, you know, you're supposed to have a different opinion, and I want you to feel comfortable in saying that you have a different opinion from me, because that's part of you humanizing me. Don't put me on a pedestal, like, you know, thinking that you can't disagree with me, right? I don't think any community wants that. I don't think any community should want that. And I'm not gonna go and like scream, you know, like to all these people, to all these people who didn't intervene on my behalf and say, you know, you're fake, like you know, your allyship is not real. Like that's not how it works, right? And I'm not. This is not a personal experience. Like I haven't experienced this. Like I haven't experienced like somebody disagreeing with me and I said like this is anti-Asianness. I'm just saying, you know, I've seen this in like our own community, our own Asian community. Is she disconnected? Or I'm going to turn my comment on. She's disconnected. I'm going to turn my comment on again because hopefully this is, you know, less crazy. The comment box is less crazy. Okay, Nadya just texted me, I'm coming back to just close TikTok. TikTok closed me out suddenly. All right, well, yeah, so what I was saying is like I'm not talking about me. Like you know, I haven't leveraged like you're anti-Asian because you disagree with me. But I think, you know, whenever I see that happen in our own community and in other communities, I get pretty frustrated because that's not how it's supposed to be used. Like we just want to be equal human beings worthy of equal amount of respect. And if you can't disagree with us, and if you can't have a productive dialogue with us and like be part of the community in a way that, you know, normal human beings interact with each other, like that in and of itself is destructive. And that's, you know, that's hierarchical. Like just, you know, I don't think that's what any of these communities actually want. Like I don't want Asian people up on a pedestal like some sort of, oh, like you can't disagree with us, like you have to listen to us at all times. Like that is not how it works. Like we're gonna get it wrong. Like Asian people get it wrong all the time, just like white people get it wrong all the time, just like, you know, just like brown people get it right, just like brown people get it wrong, just like black people get it wrong. There are problematic individuals in every community. And so, you know, just because somebody's Asian, you're supposed to love them. That's not pro-Asian. Like don't come to an Asian person's defense when that person is being problematic. You know, like your ethnicity doesn't exempt you from having whiteness as an attitude and like having white supremacy as an attitude, having misogyny as an attitude. I mean, if that were true, like all women should be supporting one another, and we're jack shit. Like we're like I've met a lot of problematic women, right? So just because we operate in patriarchy, that doesn't mean that women act like victims all the time. Like women are not innocent. Just like all the, you know, just like Asian people, like just because, you know, Asian hate is rampant, that doesn't mean that we have our own internalized shit as human beings. So, you know, like I see all the time on TikTok, just like people being like, oh, you can't, you know, you have to come to the defense of this black person because this is, you know, she's, you know, he or she or they are, you know, black, and, you know, you are not, you know, you have to do this. And I'm like, I don't know. That is not, I mean, problematic people are problematic people. You can be homophobic, transphobic, anti-Asian, anti-black, like all these really different harmful things while living in a body of a minority person. And that is part of, all right, Nadia's here. That is part of, no, Nadya, you have to, Nadya, so if you're here, Nadya, you have to go on live. You have to start your own live, and I can then invite you. Yes, so we are all on the, we have to humanize each other. You can't just slap anti-Asianness or like anti this, like in every situation where you feel like you are at where you feel like you are at disadvantage. Is Nadya here? Nadya, I'm not able to see your live invites. I don't get live invites. So if you go live, I have to invite you. So just go live. Okay, there you go. I see her now.
It worked. I'm like sweating. I was like, ah!
That's all right. It happens all the time.
You were on a.
Welcome back. I was on a. Oh, hey, Alma, thank you so much. My really good friend showed up on my live. But yes, so I was just going on and on about how, you can't just slap anti-Asianness anytime somebody talks over an Asian person. Like, Asian people can be problematic all the time. Like, problematic people are there, like in each and every community. You can't just excuse their behaviors just because they're racial minorities. Like, that's not it. Like, and so, like I see on TikTok all the time, like somebody saying like really problematic shit, and they can be Asian, like they can be brown, and like, just people saying like, no, like we have to show up as allies to this person, like to this person who's no, like this person is being problematic. Don't, like, your allyship is not applicable here. Like, your allyship is applicable so far as you treating this person still with human dignity. That, your allyship does not mean that erase every part of this, like every problematic and harmful parts of this person, and then just say, just because this person is a racial minority, let's defend this person. That's not how it works. I wouldn't want that as a non-white person. Right? If you love me and if you support me, like if I'm being problematic, like why wouldn't you? Like, why wouldn't you tell me? Right? Like, I just, like this whole like confused and disorganized conversations about like what allyship actually is, and like why people are jumping to defense of like problematic racial minority individuals. I think it's extremely problematic. And I think like I'm more agitated by that than a lot of things. But thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I am really excited for your eventual TED Talk for sure. We need to have it. We will make that. I actually think I can really make that happen. I can help make that happen. But all that to say, I feel like one of the things that I'm curious to know from you is like everything you're saying kind of applies to when we think about discrimination, like as a whole, right? Like even misogyny existing between like, in every single group. And like, what do you think is really kind of the biggest hurdle standing in the way? Is it people like not being open to the conversation? Is it like not being exposed to this sort of conversation? Like, how do we move forward from here in any way?
Standing in the way of what?
Standing in the way of like fighting anti-Asianness.
Girl. That's such a loaded question, I feel like.
Is it possible?
Listen, I think in a lot of ways I see a lot of similarities between, how to fight patriarchy versus how to fight white supremacy, because I think all of us have internalized these two systems, right? Like it doesn't really matter what gender, what race or what ethnicity you are. Like it just doesn't really matter. And I think, like we talk about for example, we talk about men's inhumanity to women, right? And how like men treat women like shit all the time. Women treat women like shit all the time, like because of internalized misogyny, right? Like each of our own communities has the exact same problem to a different degree, that we are seeing from other communities doing to us. Like, it's just to a different degree, and maybe more harmful and maybe more hurtful personally, because it's coming from one of us, right? Like when Asian people, like, I'm sorry, like this whole battery
There you
thing.
are.
I'm sorry. Like, you know, when our own Asian people point things to us, that hurts, right? Like when women do things to us, that hurts, right? So it's we can be really, we not, it's not even we can be, we are inhumane to each other. We do it all the time within our own communities. So the fact that we are, so many of us are insisting that we remain blind to that is the reason why Asian hate will always be there, is the reason why misogyny will always be there, is the reason why homophobia will always be there, transphobia, like all these different things. Like classism, right? Like we have to turn our attention to like our own communities too. Like, and how we are living up to the expectations that we're trying to hold other communities too, right? Like that, I think that has to be an active part of the conversation. Now, that doesn't mean that don't go after white supremacists, don't go after, don't go after white cis heterosexual men. That doesn't mean any of that. It just means like that also has to be in a consistent and also congruent conversation, like in this movement, in this social justice movement. Like, hello, like I got a lot of hate from like the brown people, like black men, like saying that I don't know what I'm talking about, right? Black women, like the Asian men, like it's just like it's like people.
I mean, I think it's your, like, for me, the pushback that I get from like a KKK member on social media, I'm like, but it is what hurts. Like, I actually think about a lot. I wrote this article once, and I remember reading through the comments and learning a new word, harakiri, because all these like Asian guys were like, you need to harakiri, which is basically like death by suicide, like disembowelment. And like that stuck with me more. But it's really interesting because I feel like what you're saying is essentially like kindness and intersectionality, right? That it's not just one movement at a time, but like when we coexist, it's all of these systems that, like you show up as in how you identify gender wise, the sex you were assigned at birth, like in completely intersectional, right? And I think it also kind of goes to, like, I've been thinking a lot about how like intersectionality is a word that like I didn't grow up learning, and like does this mean that like it kind of necessitates the need for further education and continued learning to have these conversations so people understand that they exist as like intersectional human beings.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think we owe each other. Like, I think we owe us each other, like to be. It's so right. So when I talk about white women, for example, I mean, I've talked a lot about white women. Like my page is like fucking filled with it. Like it's just like if you want to talk, like if you, right, like so yeah, let's talk about that. So like I've talked several times about the problematic nature of white women. I have friends who are white women, right? When I say white women, I'm not saying that every single white woman is problematic. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about the system of white women, right? It's a pattern of white women. The inevitable structure that comes with white women because they are white in a white world. And I think I deserve to have freedom to talk about that based on my studies and based on my own personal experiences, right? That doesn't mean that just because you are a white woman, that doesn't mean that you have to all of a sudden like be complicit in the way problematic racial minority individuals interact, right? Like that doesn't mean that you have to like that. No, like that doesn't mean that. Like, so I have been sort of surprised by how my messages, like how some of my messages have been landing on people, and what sort of messages that they have been taking away from my posts. It's completely opposite. Like, do I want all racial minority people up on a pedestal, and like white people just like worshiping us, and just daring not to like disagree with us? No, like civil. Are you kidding me? Like, civil discourse is like part of this, like part of democracy. If we are not operating on a democratic process and on democratic values, we're already losing. Like, I do not want a new community based on dictatorship and like more oppression and like more people getting hurt. Like, that is not that, like, no, I don't want, like, that's not what I want.
Wait, so you're saying people actually think that that's what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some people say that. I mean, I don't fucking know. Like, I don't fucking know. Like,
that's wild. I mean, yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I think that it's just like it also goes back to exactly what you say about like the problem with saying like not all men, right? That it's not about like the actual, kind of vilifying the individuals, but talking about the system at play. And I think a lot of it is like that's kind of the moment we're in, which is like everybody needs to acknowledge that we all have responsibility for perpetuating these systems as well. Like even like you and I, is like, how can we kind of build towards that self-awareness, but also like push each other to unlearn and learn in a way that where people won't feel that guilt, right? Because I think that that's something I continue to learn just more and more about, which is like the danger of white guilt, and the danger that we all kind of have in some ways, but like the danger of white guilt and like how it really perpetuates racism as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I also want to point out the fact that, like, yeah, we want to talk about racism. We also have to address misogyny at the same time, right?
Like, intersectionality.
Yeah, I mean, hey, like, but hey, white women coming after me, right? Like, because of internalized misogyny. You don't think brown women have come after me? Like, you don't think black women have come after me? Women go after each other all the time because of internalized misogyny. Like, it doesn't, at that point, it doesn't really, it's not about race, it's about gender. Like, it's about misogyny, right? So, like, people, like, really, we really have to keep in mind that we are operating with these, these different intersecting systems here, right? Like, and you can't just say, oh, like, because this person is a racial minority, like all of a sudden, this person is exempt, somehow from, all these different beliefs that are problematic. That's not that. I think I think if you're on the left and if you're progressive, I think everyone should assume that everyone is sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, all these problematic things, just to a different degree. I think that's the best way to humanize each other. So I have racist beliefs too. You have them. Everyone in this chat has them. Like, nobody can look at me and say I'm not racist. Like, I dare you, right? Like, it's how like, that's not possible. So it's just that we are those things to a different degree. So we have to work with each other, because what you have, I might have it less, right? Like, what you have, I might have it more. So we have to support each other, show up for each other, and like remain support for each other. That's how we show up for each other and build community. That's my new vision. That's my new community. So when people want to just like be up on a pedestal as if like you are this person holds the entire truth of everything purely anti-racism, everything purely anti-misogyny, like, no such thing exists, right? Like, and I've said this like multiple times, even as a person who has studied oppression for years, I am not entirely anti-racist. I am not entirely anti-sexist, right? Like, so I think everyone, I say that so that I can invite everyone to say that about themselves. No one can say, I am not racist. I am not sexist. I am not transphobic. I am not, what else is there? Homophobic. Like, all these other things. I think that's the premise that we should be functioning on. And I think
Yeah.
I think that's the equalizing force, and I think that's the humanizing force, and I think that's the civilizing force, and I think that's something that we need to rely on, and I think that's something that we need to, find, build and find community, on. Like it's like what?
I mean, it's everything that you're saying is like absolutely, and I think at the same time it highlights an issue with our like society, right? Which is like we are taught to think of things in like a black or white way, where it's like you either are or you're not. So it's like, cancel culture. It's because we look at people as good or bad, right? We look at people versus like guilty versus innocent. Even what you were talking about from the stereotypes of in anti-Asianness, you're like this or that, right? And it's like not giving people the freedom or like the truth of being multifaceted, right? And not also saying like you either are racist or you're not racist, right? When in reality it is this overall spectrum where we're all like we all live in the system, and we're all we're all affected by it, right? And I think it's kind of like, how do we break out? It's hard to maintain hope, to be honest, and then also think about, okay, what are the solutions, and realize, oh, it really takes like us dismantling everything we know about society and how we think about like human life and traits and our own self-worth, and how we like dismantle how we think about decision making and how we think about each other and like impact each other. And I think that's one of the biggest things, which is like trying to maintain hope in this space where there is so much work to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you said something really important. I think people also need to remember that all binary ways of thinking come from white supremacy and patriarchy, right? Like that's why I keep saying cancel culture is patriarchy, cancel culture is white supremacy. Like anything you see, because binary is dehumanization. No human being falls perfectly in either of these two categories that we have constructed arbitrarily, right? Or like we have been socialized to think that people exist in these boxes, in these two boxes, and if not, we can't fathom it, right? Like we have no space for that, right? When in fact most human beings we lie on this like gray area. We're complex human beings with stories, and like our humanity is not simple, and to reduce us to either of these boxes is inhumane. That's why gender binary is dangerous, right? Like that's why I keep saying, like, you really want to smash the patriarchy. Look at these flies. Sorry. I keep saying, like, you really want to smash the patriarchy. You center gender non-binary people, like, the game's over, right? Like, so people really need to break out of these binary ways, binary way of thinking, because that is a product of dehumanization, which is, that is a product, that is dehumanization and a product of white supremacy and patriarchy. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Were you kind of aware of, like, when did you start getting interested in a lot of this studying? Like, what were you very much aware of this in high school, or was it really kind of like towards the end of college?
Yeah, so I have to tell you that I bought gelato, not gelato, but what is this called?
Macaroons.
Yes, I bought 12 of them and I ate 6 of them, so I ate half of them. So
love that for you.
I think I'm a little sugar high, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I went to a very Republican high school. Like, people around me said to me all the time that they don't see color. And
were you Republican in high school?
It didn't matter, because I was South Korean and couldn't vote, but I mean, it was people around me. None of the people around me were Democrats, and looking back at it, I think, just seeing up close how harmful those ideologies are, to erase race, erase gender, from people, how harmful that is. I think that really informed me. I think that really motivated me to study all the things that I've studied so far. Um, but I think I think I've experienced anti-Asianness as soon as I came to America. I mean, I think, and I even talked about this. We have to start talking about nationalism because, even within our Asian community, there's Asian people and then there's Asian American people, and there's a huge difference between the two. And so one dialogue that is not happening is nationalism, and the privilege that comes with being an American and being a European, and the non-privilege, and the oppression that comes with having certain passports.
Yeah.
And I have to tell everybody, I have to remind everybody, during in Trump era, women seeking asylum and like refuge in shelter in the United States because they were fleeing domestic violence were not accepted, right? Like they had to go home. Like domestic violence was no longer an acceptable reason why women should come to the United States seeking for asylum. So yes, yes, nationalism is a thing. Like it has a practical implications and real impact on women. Like
Yeah.
Hello. I mean,
I
don't
love
even
you.
have to go there. Like, are you right? Like, I mean, Trump began his presidency with a Muslim ban. Like, we really have to rehash that. Like, nationalism. Hey, listen, nationalism was was so right in front of our face, right, for 4 years, and there was no significant discourse that was created, even within the even within the intersectional feminism, right? Like the space that gets created for non-American women, especially women who are seeking refuge, especially women seeking shelter in America, from other countries in America, they rarely get a voice. Like this framework right now, what we have, intersectional radical feminism, does not know how to hold these women the way they should be held. And anytime I talked about that, it was like I was talking to a void, like I was talking to a wall, or I got the whole like, no, but the term intersectionality and the framework was created by Black American women, and I'm just, but the spirit is to be inclusive, right? Like I'm pretty sure, I mean, so what? Like never to not address non-American women in that framework, like. And don't adjust that framework to include those women. Like that sounds violent to me. No, like that sounds exclusionary to me. Like I'm not quite sure that that's the framework of intersectional radical feminism. Like I don't know. So there's like a whole discourse. Like this whole thing is a mess.
I mean, I think yes, and I think that a huge part of it is also acknowledging the fact that like when we talk about intersectionality, part of your identity is also like where you're from, right? And like where you live. And that nationalism, is something that you have to talk about if you are talking about intersectionality, right? That it's not something like none of these things exist in a vacuum, right? It's all part of your identity and your lived experience. And I think, that, you're totally right. It is a missing part of the conversation. And, I think that it's something that you as an educator, based in the U.S. is like, it's so important for you to talk about, because I think that a lot of the leading voices around kind of radical feminism in the U.S. are of people who are from here, right, and live here. And I think that that's why even you're sharing your own experience, right, of like, I mean, you're potentially on your way to more school, right, and the pressure of that is also related to immigration as well. And so I think that those parts of the conversation are so important to be had. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the form that I've experienced, like the form that I've experienced anti-Asianness, like the most recently, I think has to be, that around my degrees. And just, you got there because of your privilege. Like you got there through through Asian privilege. Listen, if I went to all these schools and I were wielding it against people and saying, you don't know what you're talking about, I know what I'm talking about, so shut the fuck up, right? Like to a non-racist, like to a left person, like to a person who's on our side, right, trying to have a productive discourse, right? That would be one thing. That I think that's a valid criticism. Like if someone were to tell me like she's elitist because she's, anytime like I have a discussion with her, she continues to say like I went to all these schools, I know this better than you, so you shut the fuck up. I think that's if I ever did that, like then yes, like then I deserve criticism. That's a valid criticism. That is elitism. Like that is problematic. That's not what I've done. Like I've used all my degrees and the privilege and the power that come with my degrees. I wasn't gonna not go to all these schools. No, I was gonna go and then take all the privilege and power that comes with those degrees and the network and the knowledge that come with those degrees and use it to betray these systems and use it to help other people who cannot help themselves, and use it to advocate for people like who need to be advocated and put people in place who need to be put in place, like all these Trump supporters, racists, like people who take issue with the word colonizer, right? Like that's how I'm using my power and privilege. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So any criticism that is directed to me and saying, oh, like she's elitist because she continues to list her credentials having gone to these schools, and I'm like, oh, get the fuck out of here. Like that's nothing. Like what do you want me to do? Not go? Like, no, I'm gonna go. Like,
I think it's also like people acting like you're not already aware of the privilege that comes with it. And it's like, no, like when you say like we're all aware that the name Harvard carries a certain weight to it, right? I think it's that like we again, not black and white thinking, like privilege is an absolute spectrum, right? And how do you reconcile the privilege that you have? And I think that that's something that I think that it's something we're seeing actually a lot happen in like the business community as well, which is something I've noticed a lot, which is like it's not enough just to tell like business leaders, you need to quiet and like give up the power that you have. It's like, no, you do have power, and we live in a system that is enabling like you in particular over others to like benefit. And so what is the responsibility that you will understand you have to like contribute to overall society, right? And I think that, we saw that happen a lot in the conversation over like the presidential campaigns over the last year too,
Yeah, for sure. And I think and I always go back to this. Like there are people who don't have to do the work that I am doing and who work at Bain, right? Who work at these like management consulting, firms and make a lot of money, and they don't really have to do anything. They don't have to care about this. They're not subject to the same criticism. Nobody's looking at them and saying like, you went to Ivy League, you're an elitist, right? Well, some people are, but they're not doing it to the degree that they're doing it to me, right? Like, and so, this begs the question of like, is the left really all that welcoming and accepting? Like they're trying to push onto average individuals and activists what they want to see in the world, like what they want to see fixed in the systems. I can't be responsible, right, all alone for elitism. Like it's a system. Like if you want to see, you have a problem with Harvard. I have a problem with Harvard too. I have a lot of problems with Harvard. You have a problem with Harvard, then go after Harvard. I'll help you.
Yeah.
You can't come at like.
No, wait, actually, everything you're saying is so important because as you know, and we've talked about cancel culture before, it's one of the things that really bugs me about it is like we're spending so much time tearing each other apart that we're forgetting like who we're actually fighting against, which is literally white supremacy at its finest, right? Like model minority myth, basically pinning like Asian and Black people against each other. Meanwhile, we're using our energy to fight each other rather than saying like, what is this effective system that we live in, right? And I think that accountability is so important, but also it's important to like not lose sight of what we're actually fighting for, right? And like, why is it that we're pinned against each other, right? Why is it that, a bunch of we're all sitting here talking about like screw you for going to Harvard when we're not talking about like education inequality and like why something like Harvard is so inaccessible. And like I think that I've shared this with you before. My partner is in investment banking, and you know, when he kind of hears about the drama, what happens, like even in the activist community, he's like, "This is ridiculous," because you know, I know plenty of bosses and managers who are awful, like outwardly awful to their people, say the worst things, but nobody's talking about it to them, right? And like the people who are truly benefiting from these systems, we forget to go after them because we're like going after each other, right? And I think that it's one of the scariest things about what the Democratic Party is facing right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think people on the left, as people who are working towards progress, I think we owe each other to not live up the values that we hate so much, which is that what do we always say? You are enough, right? Like, what do we always say? Like, you are worthy, right? So then why do we look at each other and say, you are not feminist enough, right? You are not intersectional enough. Like, you are not this enough. You're not that enough. I mean, like, to that standard, nobody's ever enough. Like, what about you? Like, are you feminist enough? Like, are you anti-Asian enough? Right?
Well,
like,
it's the black or white thinking. It is. It's the black or white thinking, which is like feeling like there has to be a defined, like, okay, you're not Asian until you like prove being Asian. You're not feminist until you prove being a feminist, right? Like, and it's the hardest. I think, you know, with anti-Asianness, it's so hard because it's like, what do you see? Like, I'm Asian American, but then to have to like prove to someone like I'm not white, you know, like I've actually seen in my comments, like both on these videos but others, is like people telling me I'm white passing, and it's really fascinating because it's like,
what?
Like people have said that like in comments up in TikTok, like, and on this live and others, where people are like, when I have talked about this, like,
what?
Saying that we're not questioning because Asians are people of color, but because I look like a white person. And I'm just like, and then this is the thing, Evelyn, which is like, I think why I don't get upset about it all the time is because at a certain point, I'm like, I just literally can't argue with you. Like, if you look at me and you see a white person, like, I'm not going to debate with
Those
you.
Those are trolls. They're obviously trolls, right? Like, that is nothing. I mean, like, right? Like, that's so annoying. That's obnoxious. I mean, that's nothing. Like, it's just crazy talk, right? Like, how many flies do I have in my room? Damn, like these snacks that I've eaten all throughout the day.
You should get like a fly trap or something.
Yo, like I'm actually getting scared. Like, what do I have in here? Like, what else do I have in here? Like, why? But I'm moving also in in 2 days.
To where?
No, to somewhere also in Boston. Let me just take care of that fly really quick. You keep talking.
Well, while everyone's gone, I can show you. This is what I started while Evelyn and I started talking. I started crocheting, and look at this. I crochet because it helps with like my ADHD.
I love this.
And I made this.
I love this. But yeah, I'm going to. So wait. I'm also gonna upload this to my YouTube. And
she's a YouTuber, everybody.
But I mean, to
wait, I have to tell you really quick. So I think I sent you a screenshot. I was getting some like mad hate on TikTok, even though nobody even fucking watches my shit. Who they were saying like, you're not even a real CEO. What CEO like spends all her time dancing and crocheting? Like, you're not a CEO. And then like I was fighting back. I was like, well, I'm kind of defining what being a CEO. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, I mean, I just raised venture capital, like title wise, I'm a CEO. And then finally, and they had commented on all of my videos over like the last year and a half. And then finally I commented and I said, thank you so much for like boosting me in the TikTok algorithm. And they went one by one to each video and took their comments down.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. I mean,
I think that could be a good, that like, honestly, all the haters, you're just helping Evelyn. She's about to hit 1 mil. Thank you very much.
I don't think so. I think it's going to take forever. I mean, like, it also at this point, like, the trolls are like not the ones that actually bother me. Like, they're actual people like who come after me. saying that it's like questioning the validity of in the strength of my knowledge and like the things that I stand for, right? And like this is discrediting, right? Like just because I went to all these Ivy League institutions, right? Like just because I, you know, yeah, I mean, really comes down to that, right? So like I'm not intersectional. I'm not anti-racist. Like all these like different shit. I'm just like, how do you even?
I mean, and it's kind of what you said, which is that's the stuff that when it comes from the community that you identify with, that's when it hurts the most, you know? And it's not even hurts. It's like,
or it's like, or coming from women, like any women, like, you don't think we're fighting the same fight? So why, right? And that's the thing. I mean, women's inhumanity to each other, like we dump on each other our own stuff, our own issues, like our own pain, like our own experiences, our own frustrations. We dump onto each other. That's why women hold each other like to higher standards than we ever hold men to. Right? Like, I think women need to step up and do better.
When are you coming to visit New York?
I don't fucking know. Dude, I don't.
Come this weekend.
Oh wait, I love this comment. It's about jealousy and feeling like they weren't afforded that chance, which is accessibility. Yes. Love that. Yes. Love that comment.
Plus patriarchy makes it feel like there's only so much room to go around. So we're all in competition.
Yeah, and also like if you feel like that opportunity was never like given to you, like why is that on like coming after me? You think is the answer to that part of your experience? Like I'm here to support you. Like if you were to tell me that's your struggle, like I who am I like not to reject? Like who am I to reject a woman who is reaching out for support? Right? Like, so why are you taking that out on me? Like this is like antagonizing a woman who is existing, like who is fighting the same fight. Like,
Can you come visit this weekend? Y'all, Evelyn and I haven't ever met. Come visit this weekend.
I think my face was just like
it'll be so fun.
You come to well, no, I don't want to tell you to come to Boston. Boston is like, I think I've outgrown Boston. Boston is like getting way too Boston for me.
Wait, then why are you moving again there? Why wouldn't you just move to New York?
That's a whole conversation.
Girl. Okay, I really need to go eat. And plus you have me, I feel like I'm going to order macaroons. Now I'm craving something sweet.
Yes. I mean, I wish I were there to give me my snacks, but I think I'm going to eat all of them tonight because I'm so stressed.
Do it. You deserve it. Also, look. We're having fun over here. Okay, love you. I'm so glad we did this. I think this is fun because like I get to see your TikTok energy too. Because I think that when we're on Instagram, I mean Instagram is such a safer place for you too. So like when we're on Instagram, you're like, hi. And then here I'm like, yes, Evelyn, go off. I love you so much. I'm gonna text you about visiting soon.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and I will see you soon. Thank you.
Get some sleep.
Yes. If you like this conversation, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. The link is in bio.
What is your YouTube channel?
Perspective.
Okay.
The link is in bio.
I'm so excited for your merch.
Thanks.
I'm ready for it. Okay.
Bye everyone.